Hey MVPs, Rico Knows here. Going to talk to you guys about the win totals of futures bet for 2024. Today we're looking at Cincinnati, right? We're looking at Cincinnati, and they have them at 5.5 wins. And if you see here, it's even money. It's minus 110 either way you go. So there's really no value bet to make here. It's either, is this a lean or a lock? Okay, is this a lean or a lock? And it's pretty late in the evening right now. I've been doing research on this video and on this team all day, which is nuts because I already know a majority of the players. I already know the team, but I'm trying to make an assessment on whether or not they're going to win 5 games and how I feel about it. And the first thing I want to say to you guys is like, well, just make it a lean and leave it alone. If I make it a lean, don't bet it, right? That's the theory. But let's go talk about it. 2023, last year. They opened up the season and they beat the brakes off of Eastern Kentucky. Congratulations. They beat them 66-13. That gave me a false sense of reality. Scott Satterfield becomes the head coach, right? Former Louisville coach. Wasn't even fired. Just moved on to replace Luke Fickell. So you lose an all-time great coach in Fickell. He goes down to Wisconsin. You bring in Scott Satterfield. Let me just say this. Usually, when you lose your head coach, you try to improve upon who you lost, right? Like if you're a college football team and you lost your head coach, you go and find a replacement that's better than the guy you lost. But that's not the case when you don't fire your head coach. If your coach gets hired elsewhere because he's great, you're left holding the bag. And you're like, well, who's better? The only team I know of in America that got a better coach after their coach left without being fired is Louisville. Louisville lost Satterfield because he went to Cincinnati to replace Fickell, and Louisville got the Braun brothers. And getting Braun from Purdue, Louisville replaced their departing coach with a better coach. And obviously they were in the ACC title game. That's not something you want to happen. So Scott Satterfield, I think it was his first year. If you guys don't know his whole story, he used to be the coach at App State, and App State was pretty good. He leaves App State, and when he gets to Louisville, he wins the ACC Coach of the Year, and he does well. But a lot of people feel like he was inheriting a pretty good roster, and it wasn't anything but a Barry Switzer situation, if you don't know what I mean by that. Right, Barry Switzer became the head coach of the Cowboys. They had just won back-to-back Super Bowls. He shows up first year. They go to the NFC Championship, lose to the 49ers. Shout out to Steve Young and Deion Sanders and Ken Norton Jr. for moving over. And then in '95, Barry Switzer takes the Cowboys to the Super Bowl and they win it all. Cowboys win their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years, but Barry Switzer was not a good coach. They just told him don't change anything. You've got all the same players that Jimmy brought. Just let them do their thing. And they did, and they won. And it's one of those situations where once all the talent runs through in cycles, then you end up with Chan Gailey. Then you end up with somebody who doesn't belong as a head coach. And Satterfield, he might be that guy. He might not belong as a head coach. Very unlikable. Remember, when he left Louisville, he didn't tell his players. They found out via FaceTime. They found out via text. He did not talk to them to their face. He didn't say, hey, guys, I'm departing. Why would you burn that bridge? In the day and age, so he said, hey, I got to my new job. I needed to focus on my new roster, my new players. I didn't need to waste any energy with my ex. Right? It makes sense, like in a breakup. It's cool. Hey, ghost your ex-girlfriend. If she don't know where you live or you move and you never want to talk to her again, just ghost her, bro. Ghost her hard. Just disappear from her life and never give her a chance to explain anything to you. No, you don't need any closure. It's cool to bounce. But you can't do that at the college football level anymore. You can't do that because the transfer portal exists. And typically, when a coach is leaving one position for another, he's bringing his coordinators with him, he's bringing position coaches with him, and he's bringing a slew of players. It's happening in Arizona right now, right? Their coach departs. Goes up to Washington. He brought about 9 players, 12 players, 11 players. I think it was 12. Only 6 had ever played before. The other 6 were recruits. But when you move as a coach, you should be bringing people with you. Guess what Satterfield did not bring to Cincinnati? He didn't bring anybody. I think he brought like two guys from last year's transfer portal class. So I wasn't too encouraged, but he did find players. And what I want to say is Cincinnati reminds me a lot of Houston. I'm trying to think of the other teams that are concerning me right now with the transfer portal. Baylor. I was going to say Syracuse, but not really Syracuse. But Houston and Baylor really stick out to me as signing certain players from the transfer portal that are just kind of leftovers. They're not the cream of the crop. They're not the upper echelon. It's just the leftover guys. And it's not that you're assessing talent any different from anyone else. They just don't want to go to your school. They don't want to play for you for whatever reason. Okay? So I saw that game against Eastern Kentucky. I was very, very encouraged. They go on the road. They beat Pitt. And then I'm thinking, oh, my God, they're Pitt tough. They got it. And then they play Miami of Ohio. And I remember telling the MVPs, this was week 3 or week 4 if you count it week 0. I said, hey, we're going to beat Miami of Ohio. Pick Cincy. It's a lock. And I missed completely because Miami of Ohio was the MAC champs, and they had a great team. And they went out there and won in overtime. And from there, you can see it. They lose every single game. They lose to Miami of Ohio in overtime. I don't know if it broke them emotionally, if the season was over at that point, but they lose to Oklahoma in a good game. They played well because Oklahoma's an elite team, and they lost 20-6. Then they lose to BYU. There's no excuse for that. 2 weeks to prepare for Iowa State. Can't beat Iowa State, not even close. Play Baylor tough, lose by 3. Get blown out by Oklahoma State. Play UCF tough, lose by 2. Okay, and then you go and you beat Houston, and you lose to West Virginia. And what they do is they blame the defensive coordinator, and they fire him, and they go hire a new defensive coordinator. And the new defensive coordinator is Tyson Vite. It's pronounced like Vite. I don't know. Vite. V-I-T-E. Vite. Tyson Vite. He's a former linebackers coach at Iowa State. And he's done some amazing things when he was at Iowa State as a linebackers coach. He really has. I'm searching, dude. I'm studying this dude all day today. And I want to show you this guy, Joel Lanning. Joel Lanning. Joel Lanning was a starting quarterback for Iowa State. And he was the starting quarterback for 3 years. You see it here, linebacker quarterback. Starting quarterback, dual threat quarterback, coming out of high school, 2013 red shirts, 2014 plays, 15 took over starting duties at quarterback for the final 5 games. 2016, co-captain, dual threat quarterback in the Big 12. And then the crazy thing happens. After 2016, go to spring football, they move him to linebacker. And he becomes a first-team All-American as a linebacker. To me, that's coaching, man. That's a coach who can develop a player and teach him, oh, wow, he throws, and he became an All-American linebacker back in 2017. 7 years ago. So the coach is great. The coach knows what he's doing. He's got loads of success. Loads of success. But I don't think defense was the only issue here. We're going to go look at Cincinnati stats. I apologize, I don't have it up. Bear with me. Let's go look at Cincinnati stats for the season. I'm trying to drop it in the bar here. So if we go back up and we look, I'm going to make sure you guys can see. Yeah, you guys are good. Emory Jones was the starting quarterback, former Florida quarterback, transferred in from Arizona State, right? After 1 season at Arizona State, transferred in. Emory Jones can play football. Whether people believe it or not, his numbers were always better than Anthony Richardson's, and they were here. 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, over 60% completion percentage. He can play. Dual threat guy, rushed for over 500 yards. And then no other quarterbacks really matter. They didn't move the meter for me. And the only guy they played was Lichtenberg, but never really popped on tape. Just nothing significant there. Running back, Corey Kiner. Corey Kiner is him. Love everything about him. That's a 1,000-yard rusher, 5 yards a carry, 5.5 yards a carry, only 5 touchdowns. Doesn't really punch it in, but he's pretty good. He's a pretty good running back. I will say that. And for me, as loaded as the Big 12 is, he's an average running back in the Big 12. Miles Montgomery hit the transfer portal. He went to UCF. We'll see what happens there. Miles Montgomery's not a bad player. Just so you know, I think he's third string at UCF right now. Nobody else really matters in the running back room. We'll keep it moving. Wide receiver room. You found one guy. Xavier Henderson, another Florida transfer. former Emory Jones wide receiver, former Anthony Richardson wide receiver, Xavier Henderson, and he's coming back for another season. Led the team in receiving, 58 receptions, 782 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's a good receiver. There's no other way around it. He's a good receiver. Braden Smith gone, Mateer gone, D. Wiggins gone, Singletary gone, Prater's still here. 12 receptions, Prater. Barry Jackson, one of my favorites. Barry Jackson was a last-second flip to come to Cincinnati. That's a great win by Satterfield. Okay, Barry Jackson, I think he was supposed to go to Nebraska coming out of high school. This is a Georgia kid. Plays at Cedar Grove. Used to play at Cedar Grove. 3A powerhouse. Only 4 receptions last year, but that kid is a good football player. That's a stud in waiting. There's Aaron Turner. So speaking of stud, Aaron Turner was one of the leading receivers at UConn 2 years ago. And then last year, he only had 11 receptions, 89 yards. That tells me that the wide receiver room is pretty good. If Aaron Turner's not on the field for you, you got some good players. I'm going to let you know that right now. Donovan Ollie, same thing. Not on the field. This is a former Washington State wide receiver. Now he's at Colorado State. He just transferred. Great wide receivers not on the field tells me either they're assessing talent incorrectly or the wide receiver room was deep. I think the wide receiver room was pretty deep. Okay? Going to defense. Obviously, they fired their defensive coordinator. None of these guys are returning. None of these guys are here. They're all gone. Only guy I see up here that's returning is Jack Dingle. Gresniak, that was a transfer from Utah State, pass rush specialist. He's I hope he makes it in the NFL. Corleone's still here, defensive tackle, nose tackle, if you will. Pretty good player. I know Thompson's still here. I want to say Jordan Young's still here. Yeah. And we'll go down the list. But the reality is, and this is where it gets to like me trying to predict the amount of games they're going to win is frustrating because there's so many unknowns with Cincinnati. There is. When we look at the depth chart, wide receiver room's pretty stacked. Tony Johnson, man, former walk-on at FAU, and after 2 years started earning real reps and became an every down player. This is a good story right here. Tony Johnson's good, and to see him ahead of Evan Prater, it's Ohio State transfer. We don't worry about it. That dude can play right there. Tony Johnson's a good player. Xavier Henderson, good player. Tyron Smith, hey, if you don't know Tyron Smith's story, this is a complete stud. Coming out of high school, went to JUCO route, goes to UTEP, becomes a monster. He's small, bro. He's a little slot receiver. He's tiny. Go turn on the tape. He's just a little guy getting open everywhere. And then last season, he transferred to A&M, was there in the winter, and then decided, hey, man, I owe it to coach. I need to go back to UTEP. I think it was Doran. What's his name? He got fired. Forgot his name. Dana? Yeah, Dana. Dana something. He doesn't matter anymore. He's fired. But Dana Dimmel. There it is. Dana Dimmel. Man. Whoo. I got all kinds of stuff up here. All right, so Dana Dimmel, he and Tyron Smith had a special relationship in the sense that he felt like he owed it to coach to go back, and he transferred back, but there was some issue with either injuries, the NCAA or something, but we never saw him play all year. Wasn't the same. Had no impact, and now he hit the transfer portal again, and now he's at Cincinnati. That's one of those guys that I say is like one of the last good wide receivers in the transfer portal that nobody else wants. Tyron Smith's one of those guys. Like, he's good, but how good? I don't know. I just know this. If he's starting ahead of Aaron Turner and Barry Jackson, he's pretty good. So I like the wide receiver room at Cincinnati. It's pretty damn good. Offensive line, you see it here. Singer. Very Singer heavy. Very good players. Tinsley, Luke Kandra, all-conference guy, complete stud. Buford. Like, these are all good players. I like it, bro. I like the offensive line. We get to tight end. Joey Bellion. He transferred 2 years ago from Western Kentucky. And when he transferred... when he was at Western Kentucky, he wasn't the main guy. The main guy, I forget his name right now, he transferred to South Carolina. It'll come to me when I look at South Carolina's team. But he transferred to South Carolina 2 years ago. This guy got injured in spring. They didn't say what kind of injury it was. At least I at the time, I never really looked back into it because he never played again. He didn't play last year. So he's here. They have him They have him ahead of Joe Royer. That's another Ohio State transfer. If you're transferring from Ohio State and you can't start at Cincinnati, I just keep reminding everybody out there, if you can't start at one school, don't assume you can start at another. Nope, they got good players. The talent gap's not that big. I promise you. And then we get to quarterback. The real quarterback here is actually, there's another quarterback. Hold on. This doesn't look right. Let me go to Cincinnati. How do I want to do this? Cincinnati football recruiting. I should never be doing this in the middle of a video. Your time is valuable. I hope you guys are hanging out with me. So I'm going to look at the recruiting class. They have a quarterback, Samaj Jones. Shamaz Jones, he's only 5'11", 218. Shamaz Jones is going to be on the field. He's getting the 2 deep. This is a good player right here. I went and watched all these guys' tapes. You know what I do, guys. I dig deep. I told you I've been working on this all day. I go and look at every single player's huddle film. It's a good fucking player. That's a good football player. Samaj Jones. I don't think he's better than Sorsby. Let me be clear. Sorsby's him. Like Brendan Sorsby, Texas kid, huge. You know what people don't know about Brendan Sorsby is nothing was ever given to him. This is the opposite of Bronny James. This man earned everything he's got. Brendan Sorsby shows up at Indiana, and they go and get Taven Jackson. And they let Taven Jackson become the starting quarterback. This is a homegrown kid from Indiana, won a state title while he was there. Initially, after high school, he went to Tennessee first, 4-star kid. Then he couldn't play at Tennessee, obviously. And then he transfers back to Indiana. They give him the starting job. He can't hang on to it. And eventually, Brendan Sorsby becomes the starting quarterback at Indiana last year. And you're like, well, Indiana sucked. They fired Tom Allen. No, they fired Tom Allen because he doesn't know how to assess talent correctly. Because your best quarterback was on the bench. And his name is Brendan Sorsby. This is a huge kid. I don't know what's his metrics. 6'4", 220. Let me. I haven't seen I watch tape. 6'3", 230, 235. I said 6'4", 220. I got him. He's even bigger than that, weight-wise. Right? I'm off by an inch and about fucking 20 pounds, bro. Brendan Sorsby, the thing they don't talk about is he's a dual-threat quarterback. Straight up. He's a dual-threat quarterback, and people are going to find out the hard way. He can extend plays. He can run, like really run. NFL caliber skill set Brendan Sorsby has. I'm telling you. He's going to be a draft pick. Brendan Sorsby's him. The freshman is good, but I think Sorsby's the starting quarterback, and I just like this offense. People are going to have a hard time keeping up with a 1,000-yard rusher, a solid quarterback, and those receivers, that great offensive line. So far, so good. It sounds like Cincinnati has a very good offense. Comparable to Baylor and Colorado in regards to just continuity and putting it together and talent. Baylor, Colorado, and Cincinnati look comparable to me. UCF is in there. UCF might have a little bit more juice at receiver, might have a lot more juice at running back, but it's similar. TCU's often. All these guys are very similar. So I don't think they're that far off offensively. I think they can score points. The problem is not their offense. Their offense got it. They got it. Oh, by the way, Chance Williams, I want to say he's a transfer from Grambling State. If he had the big G on his helmet in the transfer portal. Good player, guys. He's going to see the field. He'll be in the rotation. He's going to be on the field. Trust. All right. Let's go to defense. Just to put it plainly, you see a lot of yellow here. You see a lot of transfers. To put it plainly, their defense is probably the worst I've seen at the Power 5 level. Talent-wise. Player for player. The worst I've seen that I've been doing these team reviews on, Power 5, yeah, this is the worst one so far. There might be a worse one, but this is the worst one. And there are teams that I'm predicting win 2 or 3 games. There are teams that I'm predicting win, whatever. I just think this is the worst defense I've seen. I'm going to give you an example. Darian Varner there at left end, I went and watched all the tape I could on Darian Varner. He should not be starting at the FBS level. He was just at Wisconsin and a complete special teams player. And for him to transfer to Cincinnati and be the starter is just mind-boggling to me. But that's how bare the cupboard is when it comes to these guys defensively. Great nose tackle. I got a problem with the rest of the guys. Jack Dingle and Thompson coming back at linebacker. They're returning starters. Mekhi Miller coming over from New Mexico State. Decent player. Nothing to get too excited about. Derek Canteen. I love Derek Canteen, bro. He's from Evans, which is a city right next to where I live. I watched Derek Canteen play in high school. I went to one of his high school games. Think he's a great player. Ended up at Georgia Southern his first couple years, played great. Transferred to Virginia Tech last year, and we found out there's levels to this. And now he's here. Just one of those guys in the transfer portal, just moving around, where you're like, man, what are we doing? Who are these guys? DJ Taylor's coming back. Jordan Young's stud. Jordan Young's the one good player I see. But for me, pound for pound, the defense, I understand they got a new defensive coordinator and they're going to be coached great. They're going to be coached great. It feels very Colorado-esque on the defense. Yes, very Colorado, and that's not a good thing. Colorado's defense was atrocious. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like names people will know. I'm sure the fan base of Cincinnati is excited about their defense. Never confuse familiarity with talent. Like, if you know every player on the team because you're a homer and you've studied it, that's great, bro. Congratulations. That doesn't mean those players are better than the players on other teams. And that's how I feel about Cincinnati. Like, I know the players. They just don't move me like that. I'm just being real. Just being real. So I hope they do well. Offensively, they can score points. Don't you ever get that twisted. So let's look at their schedule next year. They open the season at home against Towson, an FCS school. Shout out to Towson. They're out there in the Baltimore area. They're going to beat Towson. Then they play Pitt. They beat Pitt last year, and Pitt got a lot worse. I love Pitt. I think Pitt's going to be out there. Pitt's skill set is scoring. I think that game might have a lot of scoring in it. Pitt lost a lot of starters to the transfer portal. They did replace some skill players. They have some studs, but they lost Bud Means. I still like Pitt in that game, but it's at home, so I'm giving it to Cincinnati. They're at Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio is not the same team as last year. They look good for Miami of Ohio. I think they win those first 3 games. They're playing a terrible Houston team. They beat Houston last year. Houston got worse. They're going to beat Houston. So it's crazy because the theory here is that they're going to be 4-0. 4-0, and they're terrible. But they can score points, so they're going to be 4-0. And then they got to go to Texas Tech. And then they got to go 2 weeks and get prepared for UCF. I don't think they win either one of those games. Do they beat Arizona State? I think Arizona State and Cincinnati are very comparable. Very comparable. They can beat Arizona State. That's 5 wins. I don't think they beat Colorado on the road. I don't think they stand a chance against West Virginia, Iowa State, or Kansas State. And then there's TCU. Can they beat TCU? I don't think so. But it is at home. So here's what I want to say. I have them at 5 wins. And that's if they go 4-0 to start the season. If you don't think they're going to go 4-0 to start the season, if you think their defense is a train wreck, then you have to take the under. You have to take the under. And you know they're capable of losing this many games in a row. You know it's possible. So you got to take the under because it's at 5.5. And it's even money. It's what you want to do. I'm telling you the under's a lock because I think their defense is terrible. Now, if they start 4-0, we're going to look, it's going to be a little scary. It's going to be a sweat. But that's why you're playing the averages here. If you guys see the win totals chart, what it comes down to is you got to bet it. You got to spread it out. You got to understand we're going to keep track of all the results at the end of the season, and we're going to see were my locks any more accurate than my leans and my value bets. If you've noticed, there's a lot of locks on the board. There's a lot of locks on the board. There's a lot of green. Some purple. Very few leans. Very few leans. But you don't see too many minus 110s. On a lock. There's one here. There's one here. Usually it's minus 150s, 130s, 140s. What they're trying to tell you is they're so sure of it. And then this one's really close. It's a coin flip, guys. Do what you want. If you don't trust, the defense could be very volatile, if you will. if you don't believe in it. But I think that the offense is one injury away from not being as relevant, although there's depth everywhere. If Sorsby gets hurt, let me just say this. Your depth really matters in the Big 12. They found that out last year. Your depth matters because you take a beating. And I'm talking about defensively. You have to line up and put 8 guys in the box. There are 1,500-yard rushers all over this conference. Every team's got a 1,000-yard rusher. Every single one of these guys got a 1,000-yard rusher or 2 dudes for 900 or something crazy. You got to show up, put them in the box, and Cincinnati got a very rude awakening coming to the Big 12 last year. They found out the hard way. Holy shit, it's a different brand of football. This is not the American Athletic Conference. And it's getting worse. They had a senior Latin team last year. They had a lot of depth, or at least a lot of players. The cupboard was not bare. And it's getting worse. So, yeah, I'm really pulling for Cincinnati, but I don't know if they get over. I don't see them getting 6 wins. It's not a hard call. I think that they're less than 6 wins. And it's a lock. You see it there. 2-unit lock, by the way. Good luck with that, y'all. Hey, I'll do a deep dive every day. We're almost done with all the teams, and then we'll start deep diving Group of 5 before the season starts. Your friends don't know, but Rico knows. Go watch the whole playlist, MVPs. Get your money's worth. Get your bets in. Make the right choice. Avoid the misses. Your record can be better than mine. Peace.